He thought he was buying a condemned hillside villa just to keep his kids off the streets, but what Marcus found sealed beneath the crumbling floors was worth $290 million and would turn their broken lives into something no one in that forgotten town could ever imagine. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning Marcus Webb received the eviction notice, he was standing in his kitchen trying to figure out how to tell his kids they'd be homeless by the end of the month. The envelope had been taped to the front door of their rental, the kind of tape that doesn't come off clean, leaving sticky residue like a scar. He peeled it away slowly, already knowing what it said before he opened it. 30 days. That's all they had. 30 days to find somewhere, anywhere that would take a widowed father with 2 kids, no savings, and credit so damaged it made landlords laugh. Marcus was 42 but felt 70. His hands were calloused from construction work. His back ached from crawling under houses to fix other people's foundations, while his own life crumbled. His hair had started going grey 2 years ago, right around the time his wife, Rachel, lost her battle with cancer. The medical bills had swallowed everything. The house they'd owned, the modest savings account, the college funds he'd started for the kids. All of it, gone. Devoured by a system that measured lives in co-pays and deductibles. Now he lived in a cramped 2-bedroom rental on the edge of Red Canyon, a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. His daughter, Sophie, was 16, sharp-tongued and guarded, wearing her grief like armor. His son, Daniel, was 9, still young enough to believe his dad could fix anything, even though Marcus knew better. He stood at the kitchen counter, the eviction notice trembling in his hands, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt like he wasn't drowning. The coffee pot sputtered behind him, the same one Rachel had bought at a yard sale 6 years ago. It still worked, barely, like everything else in his life. He poured a cup and sat at the small table staring at the notice. 30 days. He'd been late on rent twice before, but the landlord had been patient. Not anymore. The property was being sold and the new owners wanted everyone out. Sophie shuffled into the kitchen, earbuds in, eyes half closed. She was dressed in oversized flannel and ripped jeans, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She grabbed a granola bar from the cabinet without looking at him. "Morning," Marcus said quietly. She grunted, which he'd learned to accept as communication. She hadn't been the same since Rachel died. None of them had. But Sophie carried it differently, like she was angry at the world for taking her mother and angrier at Marcus for not being able to stop it. Daniel came bounding in next, all energy and elbows, his superhero backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Dad, can we get pancakes today, please?" Marcus forced a smile. "Not today, buddy. Cereal okay?" Daniel shrugged, already pouring a bowl of off-brand flakes. He sat across from Marcus, swinging his legs, chattering about something that happened at school, some kid who brought a lizard in a shoebox. Marcus tried to listen, really tried, but his mind was stuck on that number, 30 days. After the kids left for school, Marcus sat alone in the silence. The house felt too small and too empty at the same time. He pulled out his laptop, the screen cracked from when he'd dropped it last month, and started searching. Rental listings, housing assistance programs, anything. But Red Canyon didn't have much, and what it did have required first month, last month, and a deposit he couldn't scrape together even if he sold everything he owned. He scrolled for an hour, clicking through dead ends and listings that wanted credit scores he'd never see again. Then, buried at the bottom of a county auction site, he saw something that made him stop. Property auction, Hillside Villa, 1400 Canyon Ridge Road, severe structural damage. Condemned, no utilities. Sold as is. Starting bid, $8,500. Auction date, March 19th. Serious bidders only. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. $8,500. He didn't have that either, but it was closer to possible than anything else he'd seen. He clicked on the listing. A single grainy photo loaded slowly, showing a massive stone structure perched on a hillside, half hidden by overgrown trees. The roof sagged in places, windows were boarded up. Parts of the hillside had clearly given way, leaving chunks of the foundation exposed. It looked like a disaster, but it also looked like shelter. He kept reading. Built in 1912 by industrial magnate Cornelius Hartford. 3 stories, 12 rooms, original stone construction. Property abandoned since 1976. Multiple failed renovation attempts. Deemed unsafe for habitation. Buyer assumes all liability. Marcus sat back. This was insane. The place was falling apart. It was condemned for a reason. No utilities meant no heat, no water, no electricity. But as he stared at the photo, he couldn't shake the thought. What if he could make it work? He'd been a contractor before Rachel got sick, back when he had his own small crew. He knew foundations, electrical, plumbing. He'd rehabbed houses before. Maybe, just maybe, he could do enough to make it livable. At least long enough to figure out the next step. He checked his bank account. $4,200. That was it. Everything he had. But if he could get the property for the minimum bid, maybe he could convince the bank to give him a small loan for basic repairs. It was a long shot. Hell, it was practically suicide. But it was something. Over the next 3 days, Marcus drove out to Canyon Ridge Road 4 times. The villa sat at the end of a winding dirt path, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Up close, it looked even worse than the photo suggested. The stone walls were thick and imposing, but cracks ran through them like spider webs. The front entrance had a heavy wooden door, warped and hanging crooked on its hinges. Most of the windows were either broken or missing entirely. He walked around the perimeter carefully, testing the ground, checking for structural integrity. The back of the property had suffered a landslide probably decades ago. A whole section of the hillside had given way, taking part of the villa's rear foundation with it. But the front, the main structure, still stood solid. The stone was good, real craftsmanship from another era. If he could shore up the foundation and patch the roof, it might hold. He climbed through a broken window and stepped inside. The air was cold and stale, thick with dust. The interior was gutted. Walls had been torn down in places, leaving exposed beams and crumbling plaster. The floors were uneven, some sections rotted through. But as he moved deeper into the house, he noticed something. The bones were good. High ceilings, arched doorways, hand-carved moldings that had somehow survived. This place had been beautiful once. He found the kitchen, or what was left of it. Cabinets hung open, stripped of anything valuable. The bathroom fixtures were gone, probably stolen years ago. But the stone fireplace in what must have been the main parlor was still intact, massive and ornate. He ran his hand along the mantel, feeling the cold, smooth stone. "What the hell am I thinking?" he muttered to himself. But he didn't leave. The auction was held in a musty conference room at the county courthouse. Marcus arrived 20 minutes early, wearing the only button-down shirt he still owned. He sat in the back row, a bidder's paddle clutched in his sweating palm. The room slowly filled with a handful of people, mostly older men in jeans and work boots, the kind who flipped properties for a living. The auctioneer, a bored-looking woman in a blazer, rattled through the listings. 3 parcels of land sold quickly. Then she called up the villa. Lot number 47, 1400 Canyon Ridge Road, also known as the Hartford Estate. Condemned property, sold as is, no warranties. Starting bid $8,500. The room went quiet. No one raised a paddle. The auctioneer waited, her eyes scanning the room. 8,500. Do I have 8,500? Marcus's heart pounded. He glanced around. Still nothing. Slowly he raised his paddle. The auctioneer nodded. 8,500, thank you, sir. Do I have 9,000? Silence. She waited the required time, called it twice more, then brought the gavel down. Sold for $8,500 to bidder 73. Just like that, Marcus Webb owned a condemned villa on a crumbling hillside. He sat in his truck in the courthouse parking lot afterward, staring at the signed paperwork. His hands shook. He'd just spent more than half of everything he had on a building that might collapse the first time the wind blew hard. Sophie was going to kill him. But it was done. They had a roof. Barely. Moving day came faster than he expected. Marcus rented a U-Haul with the last of his cash and loaded everything they owned, which wasn't much. A couch, 2 beds, boxes of clothes, kitchen supplies, and the few things he couldn't bring himself to sell. Rachel's books, the kids' baby photos, a wooden jewelry box she'd kept on her dresser. Sophie sat in the passenger seat of the truck, arms crossed, staring out the window. She hadn't spoken to him in 2 days, not since he told her about the villa. Daniel rode in the back of Marcus's old work truck, excited despite everything, asking 100 questions about the new house. When they pulled up the dirt road and the villa came into view, Sophie finally spoke. "You've got to be kidding me." Marcus parked and stepped out. In the late afternoon light, the place looked even more desolate. Daniel jumped out, eyes wide. "Whoa, it's like a castle." "It's a dump," Sophie said, slamming the truck door. Marcus grabbed the first box. "It needs work, I know, but it's ours, and we're going to make it work." Sophie laughed bitterly. "Mom would hate this." That stopped him cold. He turned to face her, box still in his arms. "Your mom would understand." "Would she?" Sophie's eyes were red. "Because I don't." She stormed past him into the house. Marcus stood there, the weight of the box and everything else pressing down on him. Daniel tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, is Sophie okay?" "She will be," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. They spent the first night huddled in the main parlor, sleeping bags spread out in front of the stone fireplace. Marcus had brought a camping stove and a few lanterns. The temperature dropped fast after sunset and their breath came out in visible puffs. Daniel fell asleep quickly, curled up in his sleeping bag, exhausted from exploring. Sophie lay on her side, facing away from Marcus, earbuds in. Marcus sat with his back against the wall, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. The villa creaked and groaned around them, settling into the cold. Every sound made him tense. What if the roof gave way? What if the floor collapsed? What if he'd just brought his kids into a death trap? But morning came, and the house was still standing. Over the next week, Marcus worked like a man possessed. He patched the worst holes in the roof with tarps and plywood. He boarded up the broken windows. He ran a generator he'd borrowed from a buddy and rigged up enough temporary lighting to see by. He found a hand pump well out back that still worked, giving them access to cold, rusty water. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't safe by any official standard, but it was shelter, and slowly, inch by inch, he started to make it livable. Sophie helped grudgingly, holding boards while he hammered, sweeping out debris. Daniel turned it into an adventure, naming rooms and exploring every corner. One afternoon, Marcus was working in the basement, trying to assess the foundation damage. The basement was a maze of stone walls and low ceilings, damp and dark. He moved carefully, flashlight in hand, checking for cracks, testing support beams. Most of the damage was in the back, where the landslide had hit, but the front section seemed stable. He was about to head back upstairs when something caught his eye, a section of wall that didn't quite match the others. The stones were the same, but the mortar was different, newer, maybe from the 1970s based on the color. He stepped closer, running his hand along the seam. It was subtle, almost invisible, but once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. He knocked on the wall. Hollow. His pulse quickened. He knocked again, moving along the seam. Definitely hollow. There was something behind this wall. He went upstairs and grabbed his pry bar and a hammer. Sophie was in the kitchen, trying to organize their limited supplies. "What are you doing?" she asked. Found something weird in the basement. Probably nothing. Probably a family of rats, she muttered. Back downstairs, Marcus wedged the pry bar into the seam and pulled. The mortar crumbled easily, too easily. This had been sealed, but not permanently. Whoever did this wanted it to look old, but meant for it to be opened again. He worked for 20 minutes, carefully removing stones, stacking them to the side. And then the wall gave way. A section about 3 feet wide collapsed inward, revealing darkness beyond. Marcus stepped back, coughing from the dust. When it settled, he pointed his flashlight into the gap. His breath caught. It wasn't just a hollow space, it was a doorway, and beyond it, stairs. Stone stairs leading down into darkness, carved into the bedrock beneath the villa. His hands trembled as he widened the gap, pulling away more stones. The stairwell was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. The walls were smooth stone, clearly intentional construction. And at the top of the stairs, barely visible under decades of grime, was a brass plate with engraved letters, C.H. Private, authorized personnel only. Cornelius Hartford, the original owner. Marcus's mind raced. Why would Hartford build a sealed stairwell in his basement? Where did it lead? He should call someone. The Historical Society maybe, or the county. This could be dangerous, unstable. But even as he thought it, he knew he wasn't going to call anyone. Not yet. Because something deep in his gut told him this was important. This was why the villa had been abandoned. This was what everyone had missed. He called up the stairs. "Sophie! Daniel! Come down here!" Footsteps thundered overhead. Daniel appeared first, flashlight bouncing. "What is it?" "Look," Marcus said, pointing. Sophie came down more slowly, arms crossed. But when she saw the opening, her expression shifted. "What the hell?" "Language," Marcus said automatically. "I don't know what it is, but I'm going to find out." "Now?" Daniel asked, eyes wide. Marcus looked at the dark stairwell, then at his kids. Sophie's skeptical face. Daniel's excited one. He thought about Rachel, about what she would say. She'd probably tell him to be careful, to think it through. But she'd also understand the pull of a mystery, the need to know. "Yeah," he said. "Now." He went first, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The stairs were steep, descending at least 20 feet into the earth. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell changed, less musty, more clean, almost sterile. Sophie and Daniel followed close behind, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a corridor. Marcus stopped, his flashlight revealing what lay ahead. The corridor was lined with smooth stone walls, and along the ceiling he could make out the shapes of old electrical conduits, thick cables running the length of the passage. Someone had wired this place, decades ago maybe, but it had been wired. Which meant there had been power down here. Which meant this wasn't just a wine cellar or a storm shelter. "Dad," Sophie whispered, "what is this place?" Marcus moved forward slowly, his light dancing across the walls. The corridor stretched about 30 feet, then ended at a heavy metal door. It was industrial, like something from a bank vault, with a large wheel lock in the center. Rust had claimed parts of it, but the metal was thick, solid, built to last, built to protect. His heart hammered in his chest as he reached for the wheel. It was stiff, frozen in place. He gripped it with both hands and pulled. Nothing. He tried again, throwing his weight into it. The wheel groaned, metal scraping against metal. Then slowly, impossibly, it began to turn. 1 rotation. 2. 3. Something inside the door clicked, loud and final. Marcus pulled the handle, and the door swung open with a groan that echoed through the passage. Cold air rushed out, carrying with it a smell that was somehow both ancient and preserved. He stepped through the doorway and swept his flashlight across the space beyond. And then he stopped breathing. The room was enormous, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the hillside. The ceiling was at least 12 feet high, supported by stone pillars, and lining the walls, floor to ceiling, were shelves. But these weren't ordinary shelves. They were display cases, climate-controlled glass enclosures, and inside them he could see shapes. Paintings in ornate frames, sculptures on pedestals, rows and rows of objects, all carefully arranged, all perfectly preserved. "Oh my God," Sophie breathed behind him. Marcus moved deeper into the room, his flashlight catching details that made his head spin. A painting of a woman in Renaissance clothing, the colors still vibrant under the glass. A marble sculpture of a Greek figure, flawless and pale. Shelves lined with leather-bound books, their spines embossed with gold lettering. A collection of jade figurines, ancient-looking pottery, what looked like medieval manuscripts under protective covers. "Is this real?" Daniel whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. He was staring at a painting near the back wall, his flashlight illuminating a signature in the bottom corner. He wasn't an art expert, but even he recognized the name. And if that was real, if that signature was authentic, then this one painting alone was worth millions. His knees felt weak. He reached out to steady himself against one of the stone pillars. "Dad!" Sophie's voice was tight with fear. "What is all this?" Marcus turned slowly, taking in the full scope of the room. This wasn't just a collection. This was a vault, a carefully curated, meticulously preserved archive of priceless artifacts. And it was sitting beneath his condemned villa, unknown, untouched, waiting. He thought about the auction, the empty room, the lack of bidders. Everyone in town knew about the Hartford estate. Everyone knew it had been abandoned. But nobody knew about this. Nobody had found it. Until now. He looked at his kids, both of them staring at him with wide eyes, waiting for him to make sense of this. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally managed to speak. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to be very careful about who we tell, because Marcus Webb, the broke contractor who'd spent his last dollar on a broken-down villa, had just stumbled into something that would change everything. He just didn't know yet whether that change would save them or destroy them." Marcus didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He lay in his sleeping bag in the parlor, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying everything he'd seen in that vault over and over, like a film stuck on repeat. The paintings, the sculptures, the shelves upon shelves of artifacts that looked like they belonged in museums, not buried beneath a condemned house in the middle of nowhere. Beside him, Daniel snored softly, dead to the world. Across the room, Sophie lay curled up, her breathing steady but her eyes open, staring at the wall. She hadn't said much after they'd come back upstairs, just helped him seal the basement door, and went quiet. Around 3 a.m, Marcus gave up on sleep. He grabbed his flashlight and a notebook and went back down to the basement. His hands shook as he moved the stones aside again, revealing the hidden stairwell. He descended slowly, the cold air wrapping around him like a warning. At the bottom, he turned the wheel lock on the vault door and stepped inside. This time, he moved methodically. He started at the left wall and worked his way around the room, cataloguing everything he could see through the glass cases. Each item had a small brass plaque beneath it, with details engraved in tiny letters. He pulled out his phone and started taking photos, making sure to capture the plaques, the signatures on paintings, any identifying marks. The first case held a painting of a harbor scene, boats with billowing sails, water that seemed to move even in stillness. The plaque read, J.M.W. Turner, 1823, The Grand Canal, Venice. Authenticated 1898. Marcus's breath caught. He knew that name. Everyone knew that name. He moved to the next case, a bronze sculpture of a dancer, graceful and eternal. The plaque, Edgar Degas, 1880, little dancer aged 14, original study. His legs felt unsteady. He kept moving. A Vermeer, a Caravaggio, names he'd only ever seen in textbooks or museum brochures on the rare occasions Rachel had dragged him to art exhibits. And here they were, inches away from him, preserved in perfect climate-controlled silence. He reached the back wall and found something different, Not paintings, but objects. A collection of jade carvings behind glass, each piece luminous and intricate. The plaque indicated they were from the Ming dynasty, 1500s. Next to them, a row of illuminated manuscripts, pages visible through protective glass, gold leaf catching his flashlight like trapped stars. Marcus sat down on the cold stone floor, overwhelmed. He'd been doing rough estimates in his head as he went, based on auction prices he'd seen online over the years, articles Rachel used to read about record-breaking sales, conservative numbers, worst-case scenarios, and even being conservative, even assuming half of these pieces were somehow fake or misattributed, he was looking at tens of millions of dollars. Maybe more. Maybe a lot more. He stood up and noticed something he'd missed before. Another door at the far end of the vault, smaller, partially hidden behind one of the stone pillars. He approached it carefully. This door wasn't metal. It was wood, old and dark with iron hinges. No lock, just a simple handle. He pulled it open and found another set of stairs leading down. His heart pounded. There was more. He descended, counting steps. 23 stairs, spiraling down into deeper darkness. At the bottom, he found himself in a second chamber, this one even larger than the first. The ceiling was lower here, maybe 10 feet, but the space stretched out in multiple directions, divided into sections by more stone pillars. This level was different. Less art, more objects. He walked through slowly, his flashlight revealing treasure after treasure. An entire section dedicated to antique furniture, chairs that looked like thrones, tables with inlaid mother-of-pearl, cabinets carved from wood so dark it was almost black. Another section held what appeared to be ancient pottery, Greek and Roman pieces arranged by era. He found shelves of vintage wine bottles, labels faded but still legible, years going back to the 1800s. An entire wall was dedicated to rare books, first editions, manuscripts, things he couldn't even identify. In the center of the room stood a glass case larger than all the others, and inside it, catching his light like a small sun, was a collection of jewelry. Not costume jewelry, real pieces. Necklaces dripping with stones he was pretty sure were actual diamonds and emeralds. Tiaras that looked like they'd been worn by royalty. Rings with gems the size of his thumbnail. He leaned closer, reading the plaques. Property of the Duchess of Marlborough, 1792. Formerly owned by Catherine the Great, 1768. Gift from Napoleon Bonaparte to Josephine, 1804. Marcus stepped back, his hand over his mouth. This wasn't just a collection. This was history, literal history, locked away beneath his feet. He found the third staircase almost by accident, tucked behind a section of bookshelves. This one was different from the others, narrower, the stairs carved rougher, like they'd been added later. He hesitated, then descended. 15 stairs this time, ending in a corridor that branched into 3 separate chambers. He chose the middle one. The door was already open. Inside, the room was smaller, more intimate. The walls were lined with paintings again, but these were different, darker, more intense. He recognized a Rembrandt immediately, then a El Greco, a Goya, pieces that made his chest tighten just looking at them. But what stopped him cold was the far wall. There, in a specially lit case, was a single painting. It was smaller than the others, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, showing a woman with an enigmatic smile, her hands folded, her eyes following him as he moved. He didn't need to read the plaque. He knew what this was, or what it was supposed to be. He stepped closer, his hands shaking. The plaque read, Leonardo da Vinci, Early Study for La Gioconda, 1503, authenticated 1921 by Dr. Friedrich Hartmann, Louvre Museum. Marcus sat down hard on the floor. This couldn't be real. This had to be a copy. But the case, the preservation, the authentication from the Louvre, everything about it screamed authenticity. He pulled out his phone and took a dozen photos, his mind reeling. If this was real, if even half of what he was seeing was real, then this collection wasn't worth tens of millions. It was worth hundreds of millions, maybe more. He thought about his kids sleeping upstairs, about the eviction notice that had brought him here, about the $8,500 that had seemed like such a desperate gamble. And he started to laugh, quietly at first, then harder, until tears ran down his face, and he wasn't sure if he was laughing or crying or both. When he finally made it back upstairs, the sun was starting to rise. Sophie was awake, sitting on the front steps, wrapped in a blanket. She looked up when he emerged from the basement, covered in dust and cobwebs. "You were down there all night," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus sat down beside her, his body aching, his mind exhausted. "There's more," he said. "How much more?" "2 more levels, maybe 3. I didn't finish exploring. Sophie, I don't even know how to describe it." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. "Is it valuable?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, I think so." "Like, pay off our debts valuable?" Marcus let out a long breath. "Like, change our entire lives valuable?" They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun climb over the hills. Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "What are you guys doing?" "Watching the sunrise," Sophie said. "Come here." Daniel shuffled over and squeezed between them. The 3 of them sat there, wrapped in blankets, watching the light spread across the valley. Marcus put his arms around both kids and pulled them close. For the first time since Rachel died, he felt something other than fear. He felt possibility. Over the next 3 days, Marcus barely left the vault. He brought down supplies, water, granola bars, a camping chair, extra flashlights. He worked systematically, photographing every single item, documenting plaques, making notes in a composition notebook he'd found in Daniel's school supplies. He filled page after page with descriptions, artist names, dates, estimated values based on quick internet searches on his phone when he could get signal. The numbers kept climbing. 10 million, 20 million, 50 million. He stopped trying to calculate after a while because it was too overwhelming, too impossible to process. On the 3rd day, he found the journal. It was in the smallest of the lower chambers, tucked inside a desk that looked like it had been used as an office. The desk was mahogany, antique, with brass fixtures and small drawers. In the center drawer, beneath a stack of yellowed papers, was a leather-bound book. The cover was embossed with initials, C.H. Cornelius Hartford. Marcus opened it carefully. The pages were brittle, the ink faded in places, but still legible. The first entry was dated January 3, 1912. The handwriting was precise, elegant. Construction of the vault is complete, 30 feet beneath the main structure, carved into solid bedrock. The contractors believe it to be a wine cellar and storm shelter. They do not know about the lower levels, which I completed myself with the help of only 2 trusted men, both now deceased. The collection is safe. Future generations will thank me for preserving what wars and greed would otherwise destroy. Marcus kept reading, turning pages carefully. The journal spanned decades. Hartford wrote about acquiring pieces, about authentication processes, about his growing paranoia that the world was falling apart and that art, culture, and history needed to be protected. There were entries from 1914 about World War I, how he'd purchased collections from desperate European families fleeing the conflict. Entries from 1929 about the stock market crash, how he'd bought pieces for fractions of their value from men who needed cash to survive. Entries from 1939 about the start of World War II, his conviction that civilization was ending and that someone needed to save what could be saved. The later entries grew darker. Hartford wrote about his children fighting over his fortune, about lawyers circling like vultures, about his realization that if he died, the collection would be discovered, broken up, sold off piece by piece. He wrote about his decision to seal the vault, to make it look like the villa had nothing of value, to let the world forget about the Hartford estate. The final entry was dated October 17th, 1976. I am dying. The doctors give me weeks, perhaps days. My children care nothing for art, only money. They will tear this place apart looking for assets to claim, but they will not find the vault. I have sealed the entrance, made it invisible. The collection will sleep until someone worthy discovers it, someone who needs it not for greed, but for survival. Perhaps that person does not exist. Perhaps the vault will remain hidden forever. If you are reading this, stranger, then you have found what I could not bear to share. Use it wisely. The world has little wisdom left. C.H. What happens next will force Marcus to make impossible choices, reveal secrets powerful people want kept buried, and prove that some discoveries are worth everything. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus read the final entry 3 times, his throat tight. Hartford had died in 1976. The villa had been abandoned shortly after. Everyone assumed it was worthless, damaged by the landslide, condemned, forgotten. But it had all been intentional. Hartford had orchestrated the whole thing, creating the perfect hiding place for his collection by making the villa look like a disaster no one would want. And it had worked for nearly 50 years. Until Marcus, desperate and broke, had bought it for $8,500 at an auction nobody else attended. He closed the journal and sat back in the chair. His hands were shaking. This was real. All of it was real. And now he had to figure out what to do about it. The first question was legal. Did he own this? The property was his, legally purchased at a public auction. But did that mean he owned everything in it? What if Hartford's descendants had a claim? What if the government got involved? He needed legal advice. But who could he trust? Who could he tell without risking everything? That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus sat in the kitchen with his laptop and searched for lawyers who specialized in found property, estate law, art authentication. He filled out 3 contact forms on different law firm websites, keeping the details vague. Found valuable items on recently purchased property. Need advice on ownership rights. He hit send and closed the laptop, his stomach churning. While he waited for responses, he kept researching. He learned about laws regarding treasure troves, abandoned property, rightful ownership. He read about cases where people had found valuable things in houses they'd bought and ended up in years-long legal battles. He read about art recovered from Nazi looters, about families reclaiming stolen paintings after decades. The more he read, the more complicated it became. 2 days later, he got a call from a lawyer in Phoenix named David Brennan. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Webb, this is David Brennan from Brennan & Associates. You filled out a contact form on our website about found property." Marcus's mouth went dry. "Yeah, that was me." "Can you tell me more about the situation?" Marcus hesitated. "I'd rather not discuss details over the phone. Can we meet?" There was a pause. "I'm in Phoenix. You're listed as calling from Red Canyon. That's, 4 hours away?" "I'll drive to you," Marcus said. "When can you meet?" Another pause. "You sound serious about this." "I am." "Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. My office is downtown." Marcus wrote down the address and hung up. The next morning, he told Sophie he had to go to Phoenix for the day, asked her to watch Daniel. She gave him a suspicious look, but didn't argue. The drive took 4.5 hours through desert and mountains. Brennan's office was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel. Marcus felt out of place in his jeans and work boots, but the receptionist was polite, professional. Brennan turned out to be younger than Marcus expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. They shook hands, and Brennan led him into a conference room with a view of the city. "So," Brennan said, sitting down, "tell me what you found." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the photo gallery. He'd organized the pictures into folders: paintings, sculptures, artifacts, the journal. He slid the phone across the table. Brennan picked it up and started scrolling. His expression didn't change at first, then his eyes widened slightly. He scrolled faster, then stopped, went back, zoomed in on a photo. "Where did you get these?" "I bought a property at auction. Found a sealed vault underneath. Everything you're seeing is in that vault." Brennan looked up. "Everything?" "And more. I've documented over 300 pieces so far. I'm not done cataloguing." Brennan set the phone down carefully. "Mr. Webb, do you understand what you're showing me?" "I think so. Some of these pieces, if they're authentic, are worth millions individually. This collection, if it's real, could be worth—" He trailed off, doing math in his head. "A lot." "I need to know if I own it," Marcus said. "Legally. The property is mine. I bought it at a county auction. Clean title. But the vault was sealed, hidden. Does that change anything?" Brennan leaned back in his chair, thinking. "It depends. If the previous owner sealed it intentionally to hide it from heirs or creditors, there could be claims. If descendants can prove ownership, they might have rights, but if the property was properly sold through legal channels and no one disclosed the vault's existence, then yes, as the property owner, you likely have a strong claim to anything found on or in the property." He leaned forward. "But here's what's going to happen. The moment this becomes public, you're going to have lawyers coming out of the woodwork. Descendants, auction houses, museums, the IRS, everyone's going to want a piece. You need to be very careful about how you proceed." "What do you recommend?" Marcus asked. Brennan tapped his fingers on the table. "First, we authenticate, quietly. I know people who can verify these pieces without creating a paper trail. Art historians, appraisers, people who can be discreet. Second, we establish clear legal ownership through documentation. I'll research the property history, the Hartford estate, any potential claimants. Third, we don't tell anyone until we're ready. Not friends, not family, nobody." "I already told my kids," Marcus said. Brennan nodded. "Okay, kids are fine. They won't talk to lawyers, but no one else. Can you do that?" Marcus thought about it. "My brother-in-law. Rachel's brother. He's a lawyer too, estate planning. I trust him completely." "What's his name?" "Thomas Cooper. Practices in Tucson." Brennan pulled out his laptop and typed. After a minute, he nodded. "Cooper and Mitchell, estate planning and probate. Good firm. You can bring him in, but make sure he understands the confidentiality. This can't leak." "It won't," Marcus said. "He's family." They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Brennan asked questions about the property purchase, the auction, the vault's construction. He took notes, asked for copies of Marcus's photos, explained what documentation they'd need. By the time Marcus left, his head was spinning, but he had a plan. Brennan would research the legal side. Marcus would contact Thomas and bring him into the loop, and they'd start authentication quietly, one piece at a time. The drive back to Red Canyon felt longer than the drive out. Marcus's mind raced with possibilities and fears. What if Hartford's descendants came forward? What if the collection was seized? What if this all fell apart before he could secure it? But beneath the fear was something else. Hope. Real, tangible hope. For the first time since Rachel died, he could see a future that wasn't just survival. He could see his kids going to college, could see them having opportunities he'd never had, could see himself building something that mattered. When he got home, Sophie and Daniel were sitting on the porch waiting. "Well?" Sophie asked. Marcus sat down between them. "We have a shot, a real shot, but we have to be smart about this." "What does that mean?" she pressed. "It means we don't tell anyone, not friends, not neighbors, nobody. We keep living like normal while the lawyers figure out ownership. Then we bring in experts to confirm what we have. And then, if everything checks out, we go public." Daniel's eyes were wide. "And then we're rich?" Marcus smiled. "And then we're secure. There's a difference. Sophie looked at him. Does this mean we're not homeless? Yeah, Marcus said, pulling her close. Yeah, baby, I think we're going to be okay. The next day, Marcus called Thomas. His brother-in-law answered on the second ring. Marcus, everything all right? Tom, I need to talk to you about something. In person. Can you come to Red Canyon? There was a pause. When? Soon as possible. This week if you can. Marcus, what's going on? You're freaking me out. I can't explain over the phone. Please, trust me. Another pause. Okay, I'll drive up Saturday. But you better have coffee ready. I will. And Tom, don't mention this to anyone, not even Susan. Now you're really freaking me out. Saturday, Marcus said. I'll explain everything. Saturday came. Thomas arrived around noon, pulling up in his sensible sedan. He stepped out, tall and thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and the cautious demeanor of a man who spent his life reading fine print. Marcus met him at the door, shook his hand. Thanks for coming. You look terrible, Thomas said. When's the last time you slept? Couple days ago. Come inside. They sat in the kitchen. Daniel was at a friend's house. Sophie was upstairs. Marcus made coffee and sat down across from Thomas. What I'm about to show you can't leave this room. Not yet. Agreed? Thomas frowned. Marcus, if this is illegal, it's not. Just promise me. Okay, I promise. Marcus pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. Scroll through the photos. Take your time. Thomas picked up the phone, started scrolling. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to disbelief. He looked up. What am I looking at? A vault, beneath this house, sealed since 1976. I found it by accident 2 weeks ago. Thomas scrolled more. These can't be real. I think they are. I've been researching. I found the original owner's journal. It's all documented. Marcus, Thomas set the phone down. Do you understand what you're saying? If even a fraction of these pieces are authentic, you're sitting on one of the largest private art collections in the world. I know. Where did it come from? Marcus explained everything. The auction, the villa, the sealed wall, the journal, Hartford's story, his plan to hide the collection from his children. Thomas listened without interrupting, his lawyer brain processing every detail. When Marcus finished, Thomas sat back and whistled softly. Okay, this is huge. I met with a lawyer in Phoenix, David Brennan. He's helping with the legal side, but I need you too, family I can trust. Thomas nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Help me protect it. Help me make sure Sophie and Daniel are taken care of if something happens to me. Help me do this right. Thomas reached across the table and gripped Marcus's shoulder. Rachel would be proud of you. You know that, right? Marcus's throat tightened. I'm just trying not to screw this up. You won't. We won't let you. That afternoon, Marcus took Thomas down into the vault. He watched his brother-in-law's face as they descended the stairs, as the vault door opened, as the collection revealed itself piece by piece. Thomas moved through the rooms in silence, stopping at each case, reading plaques, taking it all in. When they reached the third level and stood in front of the Da Vinci study, Thomas whispered, "My God." "Yeah," Marcus said. Thomas turned to him. "You need experts, real authentication, people from major museums, auction houses. This needs to be verified before you do anything else. Brennan's arranging it. He knows people who can be discreet." "Good. And Marcus? Once this is verified, once ownership is established, your life is going to change. Completely. Forever. Are you ready for that?" Marcus thought about Sophie, about Daniel, about the years of struggle and grief and barely holding on. He thought about Rachel and what she would want for their kids. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." 2 weeks later, the first expert arrived. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in Renaissance art from the Getty Museum. Brennan had vouched for her personally. She came at night, driving a rental car, carrying a small case of equipment. Marcus met her at the door. She was in her 50s, with grey hair pulled back and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Webb," she said, shaking his hand. "Show me." He took her to the vault. She didn't speak as they descended. When the door opened and she saw the first room, she stopped breathing for a moment. Then she moved forward, slowly, reverently. She spent 6 hours examining pieces. She used special lights, magnification tools, took samples so small Marcus couldn't see them. She examined signatures, brushstrokes, canvas weaves. She took notes in a leather journal, her handwriting tight and precise. Finally, around 2 in the morning, she sat down at Hartford's old desk and looked at Marcus. "This is real," she said quietly. "All of it? Everything I've examined so far. The authentication documents in Hartford's files are legitimate. I recognize several pieces from auction records that went missing in the early 1900s. This collection—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "What?" Marcus asked. "What's it worth?" She met his eyes. "I can't give you an exact figure without examining everything and getting secondary opinions. But based on what I've seen tonight, conservative estimate, $290 million, maybe more." The number hung in the air like something physical. Marcus sat down hard. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Mr. Webb, you're in possession of one of the most significant private art collections ever assembled. Museums would kill for pieces like this. Collectors would pay anything. This is extraordinary." She stood up. "I'll write up my preliminary findings. You'll need more authentication, second and third opinions on the major pieces, but yes, this is real, and yes, you need to be very, very careful about what you do next." After she left, Marcus sat alone in the vault, Dr. Vasquez's words echoing in his head. $290 million. He'd bought a condemned villa for $8,500 and found a treasure worth $290 million. It was insane, impossible, and completely, terrifyingly real. He climbed back upstairs as dawn broke. Sophie was awake, sitting at the kitchen table. "Well?" she asked. Marcus sat down across from her. "It's real. All of it. The expert confirmed it." "How much?" "More than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Does this mean we're going to be okay?" Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Yeah, baby, we're going to be more than okay." She cried then, really cried, all the fear and grief and exhaustion pouring out. Marcus held her, tears running down his own face. Daniel appeared in the doorway, sleepy and confused. "Why is everyone crying?" "Happy tears," Marcus said, pulling him into the hug. "We're crying happy tears." They sat there together as the sun rose over the Red Canyon hills, 3 people who'd lost everything and found something impossible. And somewhere beneath their feet, in chambers carved from stone and filled with centuries of beauty, Cornelius Hartford's collection waited, ready finally to come into the light. The leak happened on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Dr. Vasquez's authentication. Marcus was in the kitchen making breakfast when his phone started buzzing. 1 notification, then 5, then 20, then it didn't stop. He picked it up, confused, and saw his name trending on social media. His stomach dropped. Someone had posted photos, not his photos, but pictures taken from outside the villa. Shots of Dr. Vasquez arriving late at night, blurry images of the vault door, and worse, screenshots of text messages between someone at the Getty Museum and a friend talking about the Hartford collection and biggest find in decades, and some contractor in Arizona sitting on $300 million. "Dad?" Sophie appeared in the doorway, her own phone in her hand. "Are you seeing this?" Marcus scrolled through the posts, his hands shaking. The story was everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, local news sites picking it up. Within an hour, the first news van pulled up outside the villa. By noon, there were 6. Reporters with cameras and microphones lined the dirt road, waiting. Marcus kept the doors locked, curtains drawn, phone ringing non-stop with numbers he didn't recognize. Brennan called around 2. "Have you seen it?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "How bad is it?" "Bad. Every major news outlet is running the story. AP, Reuters, CNN. Your international news." "How did this happen?" "I'm trying to find out. Someone at the Getty talked, or someone saw Vasquez. Doesn't matter now. What matters is how we respond." "What do we do?" Marcus asked, watching through a crack in the curtains as more vans arrived. "Nothing yet. Don't talk to anyone. I'm flying out tonight. Thomas is already on his way. We'll figure this out together." By evening, Red Canyon looked like a circus. News trucks clogged the main street. Reporters did stand-ups in front of the general store. The sheriff had to set up barricades at the end of Marcus's road to keep people from driving up to the villa. Neighbors who'd barely spoken to Marcus before were giving interviews, talking about the mysterious contractor and his condemned mansion. Some were supportive, others were suspicious. One man told a reporter that Marcus had probably stolen the collection, that there was no way he'd just found it legally. The mayor held a press conference talking about Red Canyon's rich history and how the town was proud to be part of such an important discovery. Marcus watched it on his phone and wanted to throw up. He hadn't chosen this, hadn't wanted the attention. He'd been trying to do everything quietly, carefully, legally, and now the whole world was watching. That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus sat with Thomas and Brennan at the kitchen table. They'd arrived within an hour of each other, both looking exhausted. "Okay," Brennan said, spreading out papers. "Here's where we are. The story's out. We can't put it back in the bottle, so now we control the narrative." "How?" Marcus asked. "Press conference. We go public with the facts. You purchased the property legally. You discovered the vault. You immediately sought legal counsel and expert authentication. You've done everything by the book. We present you as a working-class father who stumbled into history, not some treasure hunter or thief." "What about Hartford's family?" Thomas asked. "Are they going to be a problem?" Brennan pulled out another document. "I've been researching. Cornelius Hartford had 3 children. 2 died in the 1980s. The third, a daughter named Margaret, is still alive. She's 87, lives in a nursing home in Scottsdale. I tracked down her son, Hartford's grandson. His name is Preston Hartford III. He's a real estate developer in Phoenix." And he's already hired lawyers. I got a call this afternoon. They're filing a claim to the collection, arguing it should have been part of the estate when Cornelius died. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Can they do that?" "They can try," Brennan said. "But the estate was settled in 1977. The villa was sold for back taxes. It's changed hands 3 times since then. If the collection was hidden and never disclosed, then legally it's yours as the current property owner." "But they'll fight it," Thomas said. "Oh, they'll fight it," Brennan agreed. "This is going to court. Could take months, maybe years, and in the meantime the collection stays sealed. No one touches it until ownership is established." The next morning, Brennan held a press conference on the villa's front lawn. Marcus stood beside him, uncomfortable in a borrowed sport coat, while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Brennan read a prepared statement. Marcus Webb purchased the property known as Hartford Estate at a legal public auction. While conducting repairs, he discovered a sealed vault containing a significant art collection. Mr. Webb immediately retained legal counsel and sought expert authentication. He has cooperated fully with all authorities and is committed to ensuring these historically important pieces are properly preserved and shared with the public. He took questions for 10 minutes, deflecting most of them, refusing to confirm specific pieces or values. Marcus didn't speak. He just stood there, trying to look calm while his stomach churned. Afterward, Thomas pulled him inside. "That went well?" "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Marcus said. "Normal reaction. It gets easier." But it didn't get easier. Over the next week, things escalated. Preston Hartford gave his own press conference, flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He claimed the collection rightfully belonged to the Hartford family, that his grandfather had been mentally unwell in his final years, that the vault should have been discovered during estate settlement. He painted Marcus as an opportunist trying to steal a family legacy. The media ate it up. Cable news ran segments debating the ethics of found treasure. Legal experts argued both sides. Some supported Marcus, citing clear property law. Others sided with the Hartfords, talking about moral obligations and family rights. Marcus stopped watching, but he couldn't escape it. People recognized him at the grocery store. Some congratulated him. Others glared. Someone spray-painted thief on his truck. The sheriff increased patrols past the villa, but it didn't stop everything. One night, Marcus woke to the sound of breaking glass. He grabbed a flashlight and ran downstairs. Someone had thrown a brick through the front window. Attached to it was a note. "Give it back before something worse happens." He called the sheriff, filed a report, and spent the rest of the night awake, sitting in the kitchen with a baseball bat across his lap. Sophie stopped going to school after the 3rd day of harassment. Kids whispered and pointed. Some asked intrusive questions. One boy said his dad said Marcus was a criminal. She came home crying, and Marcus couldn't fix it. Daniel, younger and less aware, thought it was all kind of exciting. He told his friends his dad had found pirate treasure, which made things worse. Marcus pulled them both out and started homeschooling, adding teacher to his growing list of impossible jobs. Meanwhile, the offers started coming in. Auction houses wanted to handle the sale. Museums wanted first right of refusal. Private collectors sent letters with astronomical numbers attached. One Saudi prince offered 200 million cash, no questions asked, collection site unseen. A Chinese billionaire offered 250 million. A consortium of European museums offered to split the collection and pay 300 million over 10 years. Brennan documented every offer but advised Marcus to wait. "Don't make any decisions until ownership is legally established," he said. "These people smell blood in the water. They'll try to pressure you. Don't cave." The legal battle intensified. The Hartfords filed a formal lawsuit claiming the collection had been illegally concealed from the estate. They argued Cornelius had been suffering from dementia in his final years, that the vault was evidence of mental incompetence, that the collection should revert to family ownership. Marcus's legal team countered with Hartford's journal, which clearly showed rational planning and intent. They presented evidence that Cornelius had been sound of mind, that he'd deliberately hidden the collection to prevent his children from squabbling over it. The journal entry stating someone worthy would find it became key evidence. Depositions began. Marcus spent hours answering questions from Hartford family lawyers. They were brutal, insinuating he'd known about the vault before purchasing, that he'd conspired to steal it, that his whole story was fabricated. Marcus kept his cool, answering truthfully, sticking to the facts, but it wore him down. He lost weight, stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night, found grey hairs appearing faster than he could count. Thomas noticed. One evening, after a particularly grueling deposition prep session, he pulled Marcus aside. "You're not okay." "I'm fine," Marcus lied. "No, you're not. This is eating you alive." Marcus sat down heavily. "I just wanted to keep my kids off the streets. Now I'm fighting lawyers and billionaires and getting death threats. Rachel would know what to do. I don't." "Rachel would tell you to keep fighting," Thomas said gently. "She'd tell you that you're doing this for Sophie and Daniel. That's all that matters. What if I lose? What if the court sides with the Hartfords and we end up with nothing? Then we appeal, and we keep fighting. But Marcus, between you and me, I've read the case law. You have a strong claim. Property law is clear. The vault was on your land, hidden and undisclosed. Hartford's journal shows intent to abandon it to the estate. You found it legally. You own it." "Then why does it feel like I'm stealing something?" Marcus asked. Thomas smiled sadly. Because you're a good man. But being good doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes you have to fight for what's yours. Sophie started helping. She'd been quiet through most of the chaos, withdrawn and angry at the world. But one afternoon, she appeared in the kitchen with her laptop. "I made something," she said. She turned the screen to show Marcus. It was a website, simple but professional. Web collection across the top. Below it, a mission statement she'd written, "Preserving history for future generations." She'd included background on Cornelius Hartford, information about the villa, and a blog she'd started documenting their side of the story. "Sophie, this is—" Marcus didn't have words. "I'm tired of other people telling our story," she said. "So I'm telling it myself. Is that okay?" He hugged her, tears in his eyes. "It's more than okay." The website went viral within days. Sophie's honest teenage perspective resonated with people. She wrote about losing her mum, about being homeless, about her dad's struggle to provide. She wrote about finding the vault and the fear that they'd lose it all. Comments poured in, thousands of them, mostly supportive. Major news outlets picked it up. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Marcus wasn't a thief anymore. He was a father fighting for his children's future. Daniel contributed too in his own way. He drew pictures of the vault, of his favorite pieces. Sophie scanned them and posted them on the website. People loved them. A gallery in Phoenix offered to display Daniel's Hartford collection interpretations. Marcus said no, not until the legal issues were resolved, but it felt good to see his kids finding purpose in the chaos. The town slowly came around. The initial suspicion faded as people saw Marcus wasn't getting rich quick, wasn't selling out. He was fighting, working, still living in the half-renovated villa with tarps on the roof and plywood over broken windows. The local diner started a "We Stand with Webb" campaign. People wore shirts, put up signs. When protesters showed up one weekend, supporters of the Hartfords bussed in from Phoenix. Locals formed a human chain blocking the road to the villa. The sheriff had to mediate, but the message was clear. Red Canyon protected its own. The court date was set for late August, 4 months after the discovery. Brennan assembled a team of specialists, property lawyers, art historians, authentication experts. They prepared binders of evidence, hundreds of pages documenting everything. Marcus's legal bills climbed past $200,000. He'd had to take out loans against the property, gambling everything on winning. If he lost, he'd be worse off than before, homeless and in debt. The night before the hearing, Marcus couldn't sleep. He went down to the vault, something he did when the pressure got too much. He walked through the chambers slowly, looking at pieces he'd come to know intimately. The Turner seascape, the Degas dancer, the Vermeer that still took his breath away. He sat at Cornelius Hartford's desk and opened the journal to the last page. "Someone worthy," he read again. "Someone who needs it not for greed, but for survival." He pulled out a pen and added his own entry below Hartford's final words. "Found this collection March 21st, 4 months later, still fighting to keep it. Not for greed, for my kids, for their future. I hope that's worthy enough. I hope I'm doing right by what you built. Marcus Webb." The courtroom was packed. News cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters filled the gallery. Preston Hartford sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his lawyers. Marcus sat with Brennan and Thomas, wearing his only suit, hands folded, trying to look confident. The judge, a woman named Catherine Merritt, was in her 60s, grey-haired and stern. She'd reviewed all the briefs, all the evidence. Now she'd hear arguments. The Hartford lawyers went first. They argued Cornelius had been incompetent, that the collection should have been disclosed, that family had moral and legal rights. They presented a psychiatrist who testified that the journal showed signs of paranoid thinking. They argued the entire vault scheme was evidence of mental illness, making the will invalid. Brennan countered with 3 doctors who'd treated Cornelius in his final years. All testified he'd been sharp, rational, in full control of his faculties. The journal wasn't paranoid, it was protective. A man watching his children fight over money while he tried to preserve culture. Brennan presented property law precedents. Case after case where found items on legally purchased property belonged to the buyer. He presented the auction records, the clear title. The fact that the estate had been settled 49 years ago and couldn't be retroactively reopened without extraordinary evidence. Then came the surprise. Brennan presented a document no one had seen before. Your Honor, we'd like to enter into evidence a codicil to Cornelius Hartford's will, discovered in the vault 3 weeks ago. Marcus leaned forward. They'd found something new? Brennan explained. While conducting a final sweep of the vault's archives, we discovered a sealed envelope addressed to be opened only by the finder of this collection. Inside was a notarized codicil dated September 3, 1976, 1 month before Mr. Hartford's death. He handed copies to the judge and the Hartford lawyers, who looked blindsided. The judge read it silently, her expression unreadable. Then she read it aloud. I, Cornelius James Hartford, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath my collection, housed in the sealed vault beneath Hartford Estate, to whomever legally purchases said property and discovers said vault. This is my final wish, superseding all previous estate documents regarding these specific items. The collection is not to be divided, sold piecemeal, or claimed by my legal heirs, who have shown no appreciation for art, only for money. Let the finder decide its fate. Signed and notarized September 3, 1976. The courtroom erupted. Preston Hartford's lawyers demanded a recess. The judge banged her gavel. Order! She examined the document carefully, checking the notary seal, the signatures, the date. After 10 minutes, she looked up. This appears authentic. The court will take a 30-minute recess while I review the full document and supporting evidence. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Marcus sat in the hallway with Thomas and Brennan, his heart pounding. Where did you find that? He asked. Exactly where it said, Brennan replied. Sealed envelope in the archives. I had a team doing a final sweep last month. They found it hidden in a false bottom of one of the desk drawers. And you didn't tell me? Insurance. I wanted to authenticate it fully before revealing it. Had 3 different experts verify the signature, the notary, the paper, the ink. It's real, and it's a game changer. When they returned to the courtroom, the judge had made her decision. Having reviewed all evidence, including the newly presented codicil, this court finds the following. 1. Cornelius Hartford was of sound mind when he created the vault and wrote both his journal and the codicil. 2. The codicil clearly states his intent to bequeath the collection to whoever legally discovered it. 3. Marcus Webb purchased Hartford Estate through a legal public auction with clear title. 4. Mr. Webb discovered the vault and immediately sought proper legal and expert guidance. 5. The collection was never disclosed during estate settlement in 1977 and therefore was not part of the settled estate. She looked at Preston Hartford. I understand your family's desire to claim these items. However, your grandfather's wishes, clearly documented, were that this collection go to its discoverer. The law supports this. Therefore, I rule in favor of the defendant. Marcus Webb is the legal owner of the Hartford collection. She banged her gavel. However, she continued, and Marcus's heart stopped. Given the historical and cultural significance of this collection, the court imposes the following conditions. 1. The collection must be professionally preserved and maintained. 2. A significant portion must be made available for public viewing, either through museum loans or a public exhibition space. 3. Mr. Webb must work with the State Historical Society to ensure proper documentation and preservation. Failure to meet these conditions could result in the collection being seized under cultural preservation laws. Do you understand and agree to these terms, Mr. Webb? Marcus stood, his legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor, I agree. Then this court finds in your favor. Case dismissed. The gavel came down again, final and absolute. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, not quite believing it. Then Thomas was hugging him, and Brennan was shaking his hand, and reporters were rushing out to file stories, and Preston Hartford was storming out with his lawyers trailing behind. It was over. The collection was his. Outside the courthouse, cameras and microphones surrounded him. Marcus gave a brief statement, his voice hoarse with emotion. I'm grateful to the court for this decision. I promise to honor Cornelius Hartford's legacy and ensure this collection is preserved and shared with the world. Thank you. He didn't take questions, just got in Thomas's car and let his brother-in-law drive him home. Sophie and Daniel were waiting on the porch when they arrived. Marcus got out of the car and they ran to him. We won, he said, gathering them both in his arms. We actually won. They cried together, the three of them holding each other while the sun set over the Red Canyon hills. 4 months of hell, of fighting and fear and doubt, and they'd made it through. The collection was theirs. The future was possible. But as Marcus held his children, he knew the real work was just beginning. Winning the legal battle was one thing. Figuring out what to do with $290 million worth of art and artifacts, that was something else entirely. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Cornelius Hartford's words echoed, "Use it wisely. The world has little wisdom left." Marcus intended to try. The morning after the court victory, Marcus woke to silence. Real silence. Not the anxious kind that had plagued him for months, but something peaceful. He lay in his sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling of the villa's master bedroom, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to breathe. The collection was his, legally, officially, irrevocably his. But as the morning light crept through the boarded windows, the weight of that reality settled over him like a blanket. What now? He had $290 million worth of art and artifacts sitting in a vault beneath his feet. He had a judge's order to preserve and share it. He had 2 kids who needed stability, and he had absolutely no idea how to move forward. Sophie appeared in the doorway, already dressed, her laptop under her arm. "Dad, you awake?" "Yeah, baby. Come in." She sat on the edge of his sleeping bag. "So what happens now?" Marcus sat up, running his hands through his hair. "Honestly, I don't know. I've been so focused on keeping the collection, I haven't really thought about what comes after." "Maybe that's okay," Sophie said. "Maybe we figure it out together." He looked at his daughter, this teenager who'd grown up too fast, who'd lost her mother and nearly lost everything else, and felt a surge of gratitude. "Yeah, together sounds good." By noon, the villa was full of people. Thomas arrived with his wife Susan and a stack of legal documents. Brennan flew in from Phoenix with a financial advisor named Margaret Chen. Dr. Vasquez drove up from the Getty with 2 colleagues. They gathered around the kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, coffee brewing in the old pot that refused to die. "Okay," Brennan said, pulling out a folder. "Here's where we are. You own the collection outright, but you have obligations. Preservation, public access, documentation, so we need a plan." Margaret, the financial advisor, leaned forward. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd managed fortunes before. "Mr. Webb, have you thought about what you want to do with the collection? Sell it? Donate it? Keep it?" Marcus looked around the table at all these experts waiting for his answer. "I want to share it. That's what Hartford wanted. Someone to share what he couldn't. But I also need to take care of my kids, make sure they're secure." "Those goals aren't mutually exclusive," Margaret said. "There are options. We could create a foundation. You'd retain ownership, but establish a non-profit to manage the collection. That gives you tax advantages, protects the collection legally, and allows for public access. What about income? Thomas asked. How does Marcus support his family? Several ways. Margaret pulled out a spreadsheet. One, you could sell a small portion of the collection, 10%, maybe 15%. That would generate enough capital to fund everything else while keeping the core collection intact. 2, you could establish an endowment. The foundation charges admission, rents pieces to museums, licenses images for publications. That generates ongoing revenue. 3, you could take a salary as director of the foundation. It would need to be reasonable, but you'd be compensated for managing this. Marcus's head spun. How much would selling 10% bring in? Margaret glanced at her notes. Conservative estimate, 25 to 30 million. That would cover construction of a proper museum facility, establish the endowment, and provide your family with financial security. 25 million. Marcus tried to process that number. A year ago, he'd been worried about making rent. Which pieces would we sell? Dr. Vasquez spoke up. That's where expertise comes in. You have duplicates in some areas. 3 separate Renoir paintings, for instance. You could sell 1, keep 2. Same with some of the jade collection and several of the antique furniture pieces. We'd select items that would generate income without gutting the collection's overall significance. They spent 3 days working through options. Marcus barely slept, his mind churning with possibilities and fears. Finally, on the 4th morning, he made his decision. We create a foundation, the Hartford Webb Heritage Foundation. We sell enough pieces to fund everything, and we turn this villa into a museum, a real one, where people can see the collection, learn from it. We hire staff from Red Canyon when we can, bring in jobs, and we make sure my kids' futures are secure. Brennan smiled. That's a good plan. There's one more thing, Marcus said. Part of the foundation's mission is education. We offer scholarships for kids who want to study art, history, preservation. Kids like Sophie and Daniel who might not otherwise get the chance. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. Rachel would love that. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. I think she would. The work began immediately. Brennan filed paperwork to establish the foundation. Margaret started identifying pieces to sell and reaching out to auction houses. Dr. Vasquez assembled a team of conservators to properly catalogue and preserve everything. Thomas handled the legal framework, making sure Sophie and Daniel were protected, that Marcus retained control while meeting the court's requirements. And Marcus, he became the face of it all. He gave interviews, explaining his vision. He met with architects about renovating the villa. He worked with the Red Canyon Town Council on zoning and infrastructure. The shy contractor who'd avoided attention became, reluctantly, a public figure. But he did it for his kids, for the collection, for the promise he'd made to a dead man's legacy. The first auction was held in September at Christie's in New York. 6 pieces, 1 Renoir, 2 jade carvings, an antique writing desk, a first-edition book collection, and a minor Italian Renaissance painting. Marcus flew out with Sophie for the event. They sat in the auction house, surrounded by wealthy collectors in expensive suits, and watched as the items sold one by one. The Renoir went for $4.2 million. The jade carvings brought in $3.8 million combined. The desk sold for $1.1 million. The books, $750,000. The Renaissance painting, attributed to a follower of Botticelli, sold for $6.3 million. Total take, $16.2 million after fees and commissions. Marcus sat in the hotel room that night, staring at the bank transfer confirmation on his laptop. $16 million. From 6 items out of a collection of over 300. Dad? Sophie sat beside him on the bed. You okay? I keep waiting to wake up, he said. Like this is all some dream and I'm going to be back in that rental getting evicted. She leaned against his shoulder. It's real. We really made it. Yeah, he breathed, we really did. Back in Red Canyon, plans for the museum moved forward. Marcus hired a Phoenix architecture firm that specialized in historic preservation. They spent weeks surveying the villa, assessing what could be saved and what needed to be rebuilt. The lead architect, a woman named Patricia Reeves, fell in love with the project immediately. "This building has good bones," she said, walking through the crumbling rooms. "The stonework is incredible. If we can stabilize the foundation, shore up the areas damaged by the landslide, and restore the original features, this could be one of the most beautiful museum spaces in the Southwest." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Full renovation? 18 months, maybe 2 years. "And cost?" Patricia pulled out her tablet, showed him estimates. 12 to 15 million. That includes foundation work, full restoration, climate control systems for the collection, accessibility features, security, everything. Marcus nodded. They had the money now. "Let's do it right, no shortcuts." Construction began in October. Local contractors were hired where possible. Red Canyon's unemployment rate, which had been hovering around 12%, dropped to 7% within a month. Men and women who'd been struggling found steady work. The hardware store saw its best quarter in a decade. The diner stayed open later to feed construction crews. The villa became a hive of activity. Trucks rumbled up the dirt road daily, carrying materials. Scaffolding went up around the exterior. The damaged sections were carefully deconstructed, the stone numbered and catalogued for restoration. Inside, walls were reinforced, floors replaced, systems updated. The vault levels below received special attention. Climate control was upgraded, security systems installed, proper lighting designed to protect the art while allowing viewing. The entrance to the vault was modified, made safer, more accessible, but still maintaining the sense of discovery that had defined Marcus's first descent. Sophie became Marcus's unofficial assistant. She documented everything on her website, posting photos and updates. Her blog developed a following, thousands of people checking in weekly to see the museum's progress. She interviewed workers, wrote about the town's transformation, shared Daniel's new drawings. Major news outlets picked up her stories. The New York Times ran a feature. Teen blogger documents father's journey from poverty to philanthropy. Sophie was invited to speak at a library conference about digital storytelling. Marcus watched his daughter bloom, finding her voice, her purpose, and felt his heart swell with pride. Daniel, now 10, became the unofficial mascot of the construction site. Workers let him wear a hard hat, gave him small jobs, taught him about building and restoration. He drew pictures of the villa's transformation, before and after sketches that showed his understanding of what they were creating. A local elementary school teacher asked if Daniel would talk to her class about the collection. Marcus went with him, watched his son stand in front of 20 kids and explain with pure enthusiasm why preserving history mattered. "My dad says these paintings and things, they're like windows to the past, and if we take care of them, people 100 years from now can look through the same windows we do. That's pretty cool." The kids agreed. So did their parents. Daniel's presentation was recorded, went viral online, brought more attention to the foundation and its mission. By spring, the villa's transformation was visible. The sagging roof had been replaced with new slate, matching the original. The stone exterior was cleaned and repointed, revealing the beautiful craftsmanship Hartford had commissioned over a century ago. Windows were restored, real glass replacing the boards. The front entrance was rebuilt, a massive wooden door with iron fixtures, imposing and welcoming at once. Inside, the spaces were stunning. The main parlor became the welcome gallery, with soaring ceilings and the original fireplace restored to glory. Rooms that had been gutted were rebuilt as exhibition spaces, each one climate-controlled, with proper lighting and security. The second floor housed administrative offices, a research library, and conservation labs, where experts could study and preserve pieces. And below, the vault levels were transformed into the heart of the museum. Visitors would descend the same stone stairs Marcus had first explored, experiencing that same sense of discovery before entering chambers that now had professional displays, information plaques, and viewing areas designed to showcase the collection's magnificence. In June, the Foundation held its first board meeting. Marcus was named executive director. The board included Dr. Vasquez, Thomas, Margaret the financial advisor, the mayor of Red Canyon, a representative from the Arizona Historical Society, and two art world luminaries who'd been fascinated by the collection. They established policies, admission prices, a loan program for museums, educational initiatives. The Hartford Webb Heritage Foundation was officially operational. They set an opening date, October 15th, nearly 2 years after Marcus had first discovered the vault. That gave them 4 months to finish construction, install the collection, train staff, and prepare. Marcus threw himself into the work. He hired a museum director, a woman named Joan Richards, who'd previously run a successful regional art museum in Santa Fe. She brought expertise he lacked, understanding of operations, programming, fundraising. Together, they built a team: curators, educators, security personnel, maintenance staff. Whenever possible, they hired locally. Red Canyon residents who'd never thought about museum careers found themselves trained in art handling, visitor services, conservation basics. The economic impact spread. The town's 2 motels renovated, anticipating tourist traffic. New restaurants opened. An artists' co-op started, locals creating work inspired by the collection. The general store expanded, adding a section of art books and supplies. Red Canyon, which had been dying slowly for decades, was coming back to life. Not everyone was happy. Some old-timers grumbled about outsiders coming in, changing things. A few residents worried about traffic, noise, the loss of their quiet town. Marcus attended community meetings, listened to concerns, made adjustments. He established a locals advisory committee, gave town residents free annual passes, created a fund to help with increased property taxes that might result from the town's revitalization. Slowly, most skeptics came around. They saw Marcus wasn't trying to get rich or famous. He was trying to build something that would last, something that would benefit everyone. In August, the collection began moving into its new home. Piece by piece, under heavy security and expert supervision, the artifacts were brought up from the vault and installed in the exhibition spaces. Marcus watched conservators handle the paintings with white gloves, mount the sculptures on custom stands, arrange the manuscripts in protective cases. Each installation was photographed, documented, catalogued. The process took 6 weeks, and as the galleries filled, the villa transformed from a construction site into something magical. Marcus walked through the completed spaces one evening, alone, after everyone had gone home. He moved from room to room, seeing pieces he'd discovered in darkness now displayed in perfect light. The Turner seascape glowed. The Degas dancer seemed ready to pirouette. The Vermeer's quiet domestic scene invited contemplation. In the lower galleries, the Renaissance paintings commanded attention. The jade collection gleamed. The antique furniture sat arranged in period room settings that brought history to life. He descended to the 3rd level, to the chamber that held the most precious pieces. The Da Vinci study had its own room now, with controlled lighting and a viewing bench. Marcus sat there staring at the woman's enigmatic smile, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. From Rachel's death to the eviction notice. From the desperate auction bid to the sealed wall in the basement. From the court battle to this quiet evening in a museum he'd built from nothing. "I hope I did right by you," he whispered to Cornelius Hartford, whose portrait now hung in the entrance gallery. "I hope this is what you wanted." The weeks before the opening were a blur of final preparations. Staff training sessions ran from dawn to dusk. Security protocols were tested and retested. The gift shop was stocked with carefully curated items, art prints, books, educational materials, and Daniel's drawings reproduced as postcards. Joan Richards proved invaluable, her experience guiding them through the 1,000 details Marcus had never considered. Signage, audio guides in multiple languages, accessibility features for visitors with disabilities, emergency evacuation procedures. The list was endless, but together they checked off each item. Marcus found himself waking at 4 in the morning, unable to sleep, his mind racing through everything that could go wrong. What if nobody came? What if the security systems failed? What if the climate control malfunctioned and damaged the art? What if he'd made a terrible mistake? But then he'd walk through the quiet galleries in the pre-dawn darkness, and the fear would ease. The collection was safe. The building was solid. His team was ready. And whatever happened next, they'd face it together. One night, a week before the opening, Marcus brought Sophie and Daniel to the museum after hours. They walked through the galleries together, just the three of them, taking it all in. Daniel ran from room to room, excited and proud, pointing out his favorite pieces. Sophie moved more slowly, photographing details, already thinking about how to share this on social media. Marcus followed behind them, watching his children claim this space as their own. They ended up in the entrance gallery, standing beneath Cornelius Hartford's portrait. Marcus pulled out the pocket watch Margaret Hartford had given him, now displayed in a case nearby. He opened the case carefully and let Daniel hold it. "This belonged to the man who started all of this," Marcus said. "He saved these beautiful things because he believed they mattered, and now it's our job to share them." "Forever?" Daniel asked. "As long as we can," Marcus replied. "And hopefully when we're gone, someone else will keep doing it." Sophie took a photo of her brother holding the watch, the portrait visible in the background. She posted it that night with a simple caption: "Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you inspire others to carry forward." The grand opening was planned for a Saturday. Invitations went to major donors, museum directors, journalists, state officials. But Marcus insisted the day before, Friday, be reserved for Red Canyon residents only. A private preview for the people who'd supported him, employed him, stood by him when things got hard. Friday morning, a line formed outside the villa before dawn. Hundreds of people, from children to elderly folks in wheelchairs, waiting to see what their neighbor had built. At 9 sharp, Marcus opened the doors. He stood in the entrance gallery with Sophie and Daniel on either side. "Welcome," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "to your museum, to Red Canyon's museum, to something we built together." The crowd flowed in, moving through galleries with wonder and pride. People who'd lived in Red Canyon their whole lives and never seen a real museum were now standing in front of masterpieces. Children pressed their faces close to display cases. Teenagers took selfies with famous paintings. Elderly residents sat on benches, wiping tears, overwhelmed by the beauty around them. Mrs. Henshaw, who ran the general store and had given Marcus free coffee when he couldn't afford it, stood in front of the Vermeer for 20 minutes. When Marcus checked on her, she was crying. "You okay?" he asked. "I never thought I'd see something like this," she said. "Not here, not in our little town. You gave us something precious, Marcus." "You gave me something precious first," he replied. "You believed in me when I was nobody." She hugged him, and he hugged her back, and around them, Red Canyon celebrated. The official opening on Saturday was bigger, fancier. The governor attended, gave a speech about Arizona's commitment to arts and culture. Journalists from around the world covered it. A news crew from the BBC filmed a special. The Associated Press called it one of the most significant cultural events of the decade. Celebrities showed up, art collectors, museum directors from the Met, the Louvre, the Uffizi. They walked through the galleries, genuinely impressed. Several directors approached Marcus about borrowing pieces for special exhibitions. a documentary filmmaker asked to follow the foundation's work for a year. It was overwhelming, exciting, and exhausting. But through it all, Marcus kept his focus on what mattered. This wasn't about fame or prestige. It was about preserving something beautiful and sharing it with the world. In the weeks after the opening, attendance exceeded all projections. They'd hoped for 50,000 visitors in the first year. By the end of November, they'd already welcomed 75,000. Tour buses arrived from Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque. School groups came from across the state. Art lovers flew in from around the world, making pilgrimages to see the collection. The foundation's endowment grew as admission fees, gift shop sales, and licensing deals brought in steady revenue. Margaret's projections showed they'd be fully self-sustaining within 3 years. Marcus received a salary, modest by museum director standards, but more than he'd ever earned as a contractor. Enough to provide for his kids, save for their futures, live comfortably. Sophie enrolled in college, choosing to study art history and museum studies. She commuted from Red Canyon, not wanting to leave while the museum was still establishing itself. She worked part-time as a digital media coordinator for the foundation, expanding her blog into the official museum website and social media presence. Her authentic voice, her personal connection to the collection's story, resonated with audiences. The foundation's Instagram account, managed by Sophie, grew to 500,000 followers. She was offered book deals, speaking engagements, influencer partnerships. Marcus was proud of her hustle, her ability to turn tragedy and struggle into purpose. Daniel thrived too. He'd struggled in traditional school, but now, surrounded by art and history daily, he found his passion. He spent hours sketching in the galleries, talking to curators, learning about different periods and styles. The foundation established a youth education program, and Daniel became its poster child, showing other kids that art wasn't boring or elitist, but exciting and accessible. His drawings were featured in the gift shop, proceeds going to the scholarship fund Marcus had established. By the end of the first year, the Hartford Webb Heritage Foundation had awarded 12 scholarships to students from low-income families pursuing degrees in art, history, conservation, or museum studies. 4 were from Red Canyon. 8 were from other parts of Arizona. The scholarship ceremony, held in the museum's main gallery, was one of Marcus's proudest moments. He watched young people, kids who looked like he once did, scared but hopeful, receive opportunities that could change their lives. He thought about Rachel, about how she'd always believed in supporting others, in lifting people up. This felt like honoring her memory in the most meaningful way. The town's transformation continued. Red Canyon's population, which had been declining for 20 years, stabilized and then grew. Young families moved in, attracted by jobs at the museum and related businesses. Property values increased, but not so much that long-time residents were priced out, thanks to programs Marcus had pushed the town council to adopt. New businesses opened, art galleries, upscale restaurants, boutique hotels. But the character of the place remained. The diner still served the same coffee and pie. The hardware store still knew everyone by name. Red Canyon had evolved without losing itself. Marcus bought a house, the first he'd owned since losing everything after Rachel's death. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom on a quiet street where Sophie and Daniel could have their own rooms. He furnished it slowly, choosing pieces with care, mixing some antiques from the collection's duplicates with comfortable modern furniture. The living room wall held a single painting, a small landscape by a minor impressionist. Dr. Vasquez had suggested he keep one piece for himself, something personal. He'd chosen this one because it reminded him of the view from Rachel's hospital room, the way the sunset had looked the last evening they'd spent together. Some nights, after the museum closed and his kids were doing homework, Marcus would sit in that living room, staring at the painting, and allow himself to grieve. The success, the security, the transformation of their lives, None of it brought Rachel back. He still missed her, still felt her absence like a physical weight. But he was learning to carry it differently. Not as a burden that crushed him, but as a reminder of what they'd built together and what he was building now in her honor. The museum began hosting special events. First Fridays became community nights with free admission, live music, and art activities for children. Local artists were invited to display work in a rotating gallery space. The foundation partnered with the University of Arizona to offer internships and research opportunities. Visiting scholars came to study pieces from the collection, publishing papers that added to the world's understanding of art history. The villa that had once been a ruin was now a center of culture and learning, drawing people from around the globe. Marcus started receiving speaking invitations. Museums, business conferences, community organizations wanted to hear about his journey. At first, he declined them all, uncomfortable with the attention. But Joan Richards convinced him that sharing his story was part of the mission. "People need to know that ordinary people can do extraordinary things," she said. "Your story gives hope." So he started saying yes. He spoke at a conference for small-town economic development about cultural tourism. He addressed a gathering of museum professionals about accessibility and community engagement. He talked to a group of single parents about resilience and second chances. Each time he felt awkward at first, out of place among polished speakers with prepared slides and practiced delivery. But then he'd just tell the truth, his truth, and people listened. The most meaningful invitation came from a conference on arts education. They wanted Marcus to give the keynote address. He almost said no, certain he had nothing to offer educators who'd spent their careers in the field. But Sophie pushed him. "Dad, you've created one of the most successful educational programs in the state. You have everything to offer." So he went, stood on a stage in front of 500 teachers, administrators, and arts advocates, told them about finding the vault, about choosing to share instead of sell, about the scholarships and youth programs, about how art had saved his family by giving them purpose. When he finished, the standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, dozens of teachers approached him, asking how they could replicate elements of his programs. Several superintendents wanted to bring their students to Red Canyon. 3 philanthropists offered to fund similar scholarship programs in other states. Marcus left that conference realizing his impact extended far beyond one museum, one collection, one town. 2 years after the opening, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. An elderly woman in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse, arrived at the museum. The front desk called Marcus's office. "Sir, there's a Margaret Hartford here to see you. She says she's Cornelius Hartford's daughter." Marcus's heart stopped. He'd heard that Preston Hartford's mother, the last surviving child of Cornelius, was in poor health. He'd assumed she'd never visit, that she was still angry about losing the court case. But here she was. He met her in the entrance gallery. Margaret Hartford was 91, frail and thin, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent. She looked at him without hostility. "Mr. Webb," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Mrs. Hartford," he replied. "I'm surprised to see you." "I'm surprised to be here," she said. "May I see it? The collection?" "Of course." Marcus pushed her wheelchair himself, giving her a private tour. She was silent as they moved through the galleries, her eyes taking in piece after piece. Sometimes she'd nod, recognizing something. Occasionally she'd whisper, "Father loved that one," or "I remember when he acquired this." They spent over an hour touring, saying little. Finally, in the gallery that held Cornelius Hartford's portrait and personal effects, she asked Marcus to stop. She stared at her father's painted face for a long time. Then she spoke. "My father was difficult, brilliant but distant. He cared more about his collection than his children. We resented him for it. When he died, we fought over the estate like vultures. Preston, my son, He inherited that same bitterness. She looked up at Marcus. But seeing this, seeing what you've built, I understand now what Father wanted. He didn't trust us with this because we would have sold it, split the money, let it scatter to the winds. But you kept it together. You shared it. You did what he hoped someone would do. Tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks. I'm sorry we fought you. Preston won't admit it, but I can. You were right. Father was right. This is where the collection belongs. Marcus knelt beside her wheelchair. I'm sorry you didn't get to be part of this. It's your legacy too. She shook her head. No, I gave up that right years ago. This is your legacy now, yours and your children's. You earned it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. I brought this. It belonged to my father. I thought it should be here with the rest. Marcus unwrapped it carefully. It was a pocket watch, gold and ornate, with an inscription on the back. To Cornelius, for seeing beauty in a dark world, 1898. Thank you, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I'll put it in the display with his other personal items. Margaret nodded. Take care of it, all of it. You've done something remarkable here, Mr. Webb. Don't let anyone tell you different. She left shortly after, and Marcus never saw her again. She died 8 months later, peacefully in her sleep. Her obituary mentioned that she'd made peace with the Hartford collection's fate before her death. Preston Hartford sent a letter after his mother's passing, brief but sincere, apologizing for the legal battle and acknowledging that Marcus had honored his grandfather's wishes better than the family ever could. Marcus framed the letter and hung it in his office, a reminder that even the bitterest conflicts could sometimes find resolution. As the Foundation's 3rd year began, Marcus started thinking about the future beyond himself. He established a succession plan, ensuring that if anything happened to him, Sophie and Daniel would be protected, the collection would be maintained, the mission would continue. He created an advisory board of experts who could guide the Foundation for decades to come. He wrote detailed documentation about his vision, his hopes for the museum, his commitment to education and accessibility. He wanted to make sure the Hartford Webb Heritage Foundation would outlive him, would continue sharing beauty and history long after he was gone. The museum faced challenges, of course. An attempted burglary in the 2nd year taught them to upgrade security even further. A flash flood threatened the vault levels, requiring emergency waterproofing. A visiting scholar questioned the authentication of one piece, leading to months of additional research that ultimately confirmed its provenance. Each problem was solved, each crisis weathered, making the Foundation stronger. Marcus learned that building something meaningful wasn't about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them with the same determination that had gotten him this far. One evening, as the sun set over the Red Canyon hills, Marcus stood on the villa's restored terrace overlooking the valley. The museum's lights glowed warm behind him. Below, the town spread out, lights twinkling, alive in a way it hadn't been in decades. Sophie joined him, now 20, confident and passionate about her work. Daniel appeared too, 13 now, gangly and bright-eyed. They stood together, the 3 of them, watching the day fade into night. "Mom would be proud," Sophie said quietly. Marcus nodded, too emotional to speak. "Dad?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, buddy. Do you think we did good with all this?" Marcus put his arms around both his children. "Yeah, I think we did better than good. I think we did something that matters." "What happens next?" Sophie asked. Marcus smiled. "We keep going. We keep sharing. We keep building. There's always more work to do, more stories to tell, more people to reach." They stood there in comfortable silence, a widowed father and his 2 kids who'd gone from homeless to guardians of one of the world's great art collections, from desperate to secure, from forgotten to remembered. The journey had been impossible, terrifying, and transformative, but standing there, surrounded by everything they'd built, Marcus knew with certainty that it had all been worth it. Because sometimes, when you're broken and desperate and down to your last dollar, the universe hands you a key. And sometimes, that key unlocks not just a door, but an entire future. Cornelius Hartford had hidden his treasure, waiting for someone worthy to find it. Marcus Webb, a contractor with grease under his nails and love in his heart, had proven worthy. Not because he was special or chosen, but because when the moment came, he'd been brave enough to open the door and wise enough to share what he found. Inside the museum, a late tour group was finishing up, their voices carrying softly through the galleries. Marcus could hear Joan conducting the tour, her practiced voice explaining the significance of a particular Renaissance masterpiece. He thought about how many people had walked through these doors over the past few years, how many children had discovered a love of art here, how many adults had found inspiration, how many lives had been touched, changed, enriched by what had once been sealed in darkness. This was the real treasure, not the monetary value, but the impact. The ripples spreading outward from one desperate decision made at an auction nobody else attended. The scholarship program had expanded beyond his wildest dreams. 28 students were now receiving support to pursue their educational goals. 2 had already graduated and returned to work at the museum, bringing fresh perspectives and deep loyalty to the mission. 1 was developing a program to bring art education to reservation schools across Arizona. Another was working on digital preservation techniques to help small museums protect their collections. The investment in people was paying dividends he'd never imagined. Marcus thought about Rachel often, especially in moments like this. He'd catch himself wanting to call her, to share something Daniel said or show her Sophie's latest accomplishment. The grief had softened over time, becoming less sharp, more bearable, but the love remained, and with it, the determination to live in a way that honored what they'd built together. She'd given him these incredible children. She'd taught him about compassion and generosity, and though she never saw the vault or the museum, her influence was everywhere in how he'd chosen to share it, rather than hoard it. Anyone can change the world if they're willing to take a risk, fight for what's right, and remember that true wealth isn't what you keep for yourself, but what you give to others. As the stars emerged over Red Canyon, Marcus Webb stood with his children in front of the museum they'd built together, no longer running from the past or fearing the future, but living fully in a present they'd earned through courage, determination, and grace. The villa that had once been a ruin was now a beacon. The vault that had been sealed in darkness was now open to the light, and the family that had been broken was now whole again, not because their pain had disappeared, but because they'd transformed it into something beautiful. Because for Marcus and for everyone his story touched, the real treasure was never the paintings or the sculptures or the millions of dollars. It was the reminder that hope can hide in the most unexpected places, that second chances are real, and that sometimes the key to everything you've ever needed is waiting just beneath the surface, if only you're brave enough to dig. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories that will restore your faith in the impossible. Click to keep discovering with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe broken things can still become beautiful.